Today's lesson is Shohei Ohtani, a player like no other. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike.
Hello, I'm Kiki.
And this is going to be a treat for all those baseball fans out there, or just fans of famous Japanese people, because Shohei Ohtani is both a great baseball player and a very famous Japanese fellow. He is well known as being one of the most sort of unusual athletes to play baseball in the modern era. He's kind of a throwback to the old times. He's a combination player. He's a two-way player. He hits, he pitches, he runs, he throws, he catches, he does it all. And that's why he's a player like no other. A lot of people would say he's one of the most incredible players to come along in the last, 20, 30 years or something like that. When we say something is like no other, basically it's hard to compare it to anyone else or anything else because it's very unique. There aren't many other people or things like that in the world, okay? So yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. We'll see if time will tell. He hasn't actually won a World Series yet, or, achieved all those great achievements in baseball that players would like to do, but I think he's got it in him. The other thing is, does his team have it in them as well? Because, of course, baseball is a team sport. Let's find out about Shohei Ohtani as we get into the first part of our article. Shohei Ohtani, a player like no other. In 1916, a young baseball player named Babe Ruth wowed fans with his excellent pitching and powerful hitting. With that rare combination of talents, Ruth would go on to be seen by many as the greatest player of all time. Now, over a century later, another player has been making his mark as a two-way player, earning favorable comparisons to Ruth.
大家好，第一部分我们来看到标题中的片语 like no other， 意思是与众不同或是独一无二。例如 It was a concert like no other, as thousands of fans packed the outdoor arena to see the band's last ever show. 这是一场绝无仅有的演唱会，成千上万名粉丝挤满露天体育场，欣赏该乐团的最后一场演出。又或者说 Pablo has a talent for magic like no other, amazing audiences with his unique tricks and style. Pablo 拥有特殊的魔术天赋，他以独特的戏法和风格让观众惊叹不已。接下来是名词 combination， 指的是结合、混合或是组合。例如 Ruth did not like the combination of fish and green peppers in the meal. Ruth 不喜欢这顿饭中鱼和青椒的搭配。或是 The painting on your wall uses a very interesting combination of colors. 你墙上的画作使用很有趣的色彩组合。再来介绍片语 make a mark， 也可以是 make one's mark， 它的意思是打响名号或是成名。例如 It takes time and effort to make a mark in the entertainment industry. 想在娱乐圈中崭露头角的话，需要时间和精力。再看一个例子 Many artists struggle for years before they make their mark. 许多艺术家挣扎多年才取得成功。下一个是 favorable，它是形容词，指的是赞同的、称赞的，也可以是讨人喜爱的或是有利的。例如 The author's latest book got favorable reviews from readers. 那位作者最新的书得到读者的好评。或是 I plan to go surfing tomorrow if the weather conditions are favorable. 如果天气好的话，我打算明天去冲浪。
All right, we are back, and we're going to go back in time, not to Shohei Ohtani's youth, but a lot further back in time than that, more than 100 years, in fact, but you'll realize why pretty quickly. It says in 1916, a young baseball player named Babe Ruth wowed fans with his excellent pitching and powerful hitting. Yes, absolutely. This is the middle of World War I, so as I said a long time ago, but there's a name anyone who's even casually interested in baseball will know, Babe Ruth, and he was probably the greatest baseball player You could say of all time, certainly of his generation. And if you're great at something, you will wow people. People will watch you do something and then go, wow, you're really good. So that's basically what we're saying here. We're using wow as a verb. To wow someone is to impress someone, to make them go, oh my gosh, that's incredible. That's amazing. You're so good. You've got to be the best ever. You have wowed them. If you wow the interviewer at your job interview, you've probably got the job. If you wow the audience after a performance, they're probably on their feet, clapping their hands in admiration of what you have done. And Babe Ruth, he was a two-way player. He was an excellent pitcher and a powerful hitter. So not only could he strike out the other team's hitters, once he got the bat and got up to the plate, he could hit home runs like it was nobody's business.
That's right. That meant that he had a rare combination of talents. Okay, so moving on. With that rare combination of talents, Ruth would go on to be seen by many as the greatest player of all time. So, Mike, you mentioned that. I mean, to this day, a lot of people that like baseball, they'll still know who Babe Ruth is, right?
And a lot of the records he set, I think some of them still stand, and a lot of them were only beaten in the 1970s, 1980s, long after his time.
Okay, so as you mentioned before, he was really good at pitching and hitting. So this was a combination of talents. So a combination is basically when you have different qualities that you can put together to become stronger in your performance and things like that. So in this case, he was a really good baseball player. He is known to be one of the greatest players of all times, but he is this way because he had a combination of talents. He had multiple qualities that made him who he was.
That's why I say of all time, of all history. If you go back into the history books of baseball, you won't find anyone who is as good as him, even if you go right back to the beginning of baseball, 150 or more years ago. Now, over a century later, another player has been making his mark as a two-way player, earning favorable comparisons to Ruth. So it's taken a long time, but we have another player these days who is making his mark. When you make your mark, you're kind of getting attention, you're doing great things, you're entering your name in the history books, you're achieving amazing achievements. You are definitely going to be remembered if you make your mark. And this player, Ohtani, is a two-way player. I've mentioned this a little bit before. Basically, if you can pitch as well as bat well in baseball, or if you just do both of those things in a game, maybe not even very well, but you're capable of doing those things, they will often call you a two-way player. Now, all baseball players will play in the field, right? You'll bat, but also be first base or outfield or catcher, shortstop, something like that. People who pitch as well as bat, those are two of the most important things you can do on a baseball team and do well in order to help your team win, right? Pitchers are very rare. Good pitchers are super rare. Good batters are also super rare, which is why Ohtani is so unusual, especially in the modern era. And this performance, this skill level, has earned him favorable comparisons to Babe Ruth. Something that is favorable is good for you. It's on the good side of things. A favorable review for a restaurant will say generally it's really good. It might not be the best restaurant in the city, but it's not going to serve you or sell you bad food. That would be an unfavorable review. So favorable comparisons are saying, you know, he may not be as good as Ruth, he may not be as generational as Ruth, but he's pretty close. He's in the same area. He's in the same ballpark, as we would say. He's definitely approaching Ruth in terms of his skill and his accomplishments. All right, that's all the time we have for the first part. Now let's look at the second part, and we'll find out a little bit about Ohtani's past and his history. Born in Mizusawa, Japan in 1994, Shohei Ohtani showed remarkable aptitude for pitching and hitting as soon as he started playing baseball. By the time he was in high school, he'd caught the attention of pro teams in Japan and the US. Despite Ohtani's clear talent, though, many doubted that he could excel at both pitching and hitting at the professional level, and most teams told the young prospect that he'd have to choose between them.
第二部分介绍名词 aptitude， 表示天资、资质或是才能。例如 Johan has an aptitude for learning languages, and he speaks Spanish, English, Arabic, and Japanese. Johan 具有学习语言的天赋，他会说西班牙语、英语、 阿拉伯语和日语，或是 A good teacher can recognize and nurture an aptitude in their students. 一位好老师能识别并培养学生的才能。
All right, we are back. So let's find out about Shohei Ohtani's backstory, where he came from and how he came to be such an incredible player.
Okay, so he was born in Mizusawa, Japan in 1994. Oh, so pretty young player.
Yeah.
And Shohei Ohtani showed remarkable aptitude for pitching and hitting as soon as he started playing baseball. So I guess he started playing baseball at a very young age, and while he was playing baseball very young, he showed remarkable aptitude. So aptitude is basically this natural ability or natural skill to do something very well. It's almost like it's in his nature to play baseball very well. So at a young age, he showed his skill or his aptitude for pitching and hitting. So once he started playing baseball, everyone can tell that he was really good at both of these things. By the time he was in high school, he'd caught the attention of pro teams in Japan and the U.S. Wow. So at a very young age, he was able to show his skill to a lot of people and really get a lot of attention on his talents.
That's true. It also shows how far and wide baseball teams go to look for young players. So there he is as a young kid in Mizusawa, not a big city in Japan. This is kind of northern Japan, almost up towards Hokkaido. But still, he was catching the attention. He was getting noticed. People were saying, hey, have you heard of this Ohtani guy from this little town in Japan? And it wasn't just Japanese local teams. It wasn't just Japanese national teams like the teams from Tokyo or Osaka. It was teams from Japan and the U.S. These are the professional teams. They call these people scouts. Scouts will go out and look for young players at the age of 12 or 14, 16, and kind of say, you know, if we get this guy young and we train him right and his body stays in good shape, he could be an amazing professional player. So that's the kind of attention he was getting. He's a pretty tall guy, and I imagine even as a teenager, he was probably much taller than most of his classmates, and obviously he could hit, he could throw, he had all those talents. It says, despite Ohtani's clear talent, though, many doubted that he could excel at both pitching and hitting at the professional level, and most teams told the young prospect that he'd have to choose between them. To excel at something is kind of like to be excellent, right? You can see how excel is the beginning of excellent. It means you do really, really well at something, okay? So if you go to university and you get all A's and maybe you're on the sports teams or a member of the student government, your parents would say, oh, you're really excelling at your school. You're really doing really, really well, better than expected, better than most. You're really achieving top results, in other words. So they doubted that he would be really good at pitching and hitting if he became a professional, and most teams told the young prospect that he'd have to choose between them. They'd have to say, you know, you could be a pitcher, you can be a hitter, you can't be both because it's not 1916 and you're not Babe Ruth. So you're going to have to sort of limit yourself or choose one of these things. And this is something they told him as a prospect. What is a prospect?
So a prospect is basically a person that is seemed to likely to succeed at something or to be good at something. But we can also talk about a potential customer or a potential student being prospects. So somebody that might become something to someone else.
So you have possibility, but you haven't quite reached it yet. You haven't reached your full potential.
That's right.
Okay.
So they are trying to tell him that you have a future in professional baseball, but you're going to have to make a choice.
Exactly. And often in sports, we use this word prospect to talk about a young player the team is looking at, but might not have yet signed to a contract. Okay. So it's sort of like a little baby baseball player, a little seed of a baseball player. And we kind of think that if we sign them, put them in soil, pour water on them and treat them right, they could develop into a great player. They have the raw talent, but now we need to kind of polish that to turn them into that beautiful shiny diamond. Okay, let's pause here and then listen to the third and final part of the article. Nonetheless, Ohtani remains steadfast in his commitment to being a two-way player. he openly expressed his desire to pursue a career in Major League Baseball, MLB, in the U.S., and his talent attracted interest from numerous teams there. However, he ultimately chose to sign with the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters in 2013, as they were willing to accommodate his desire to both pitch and play as a position player, which the MLB teams weren't.
第三部分介绍副词 nonetheless， 指的是尽管或是然而。举例来说 My only jacket has a tear on the sleeve. Nonetheless, I will wear it until I buy a new one. 我唯一一件外套的袖子上有裂缝。尽管如此，我还是会一直穿着它，直到我买了新的。或是 The businessman makes a lot of money. Nonetheless, he drives a cheap car. 那位商人赚了很多钱，尽管如此，他开的是一部便宜的车。下一个是形容词 steadfast， 指的是坚定的或是不动摇的。例如 Remaining steadfast in the face of adversity, Elizabeth has become a very successful doctor. Elizabeth 在逆境中保持坚定，成为了一名非常成功的医生。再举一个例子 Steadfast support from her family helped Angela through difficult times. 家人的坚定支持帮助 Angela 度过难关。最后来看到 ultimately， 这个副词表示最后、最终或是归根究底。举例来说 The decision will ultimately rest with the board of directors. 最后的决定将取决于董事。最后一个例子 Roy ultimately decided to move abroad for his studies. Roy 最终决定出国留学。
And we are back. So Shohei Ohtani, even as a young kid, I'm imagining at 13, 14 years old, probably. These professional teams are kind of sniffing around Mizusawa, catching him playing in his high school games, going, this kid is pretty good and he could be amazing. But that seems to kind of be how it developed for Shohei Ohtani. It says, nonetheless, Ohtani remains steadfast in his commitment to being a two-way player. Shohei Ohtani was pretty stubborn. It says nonetheless. So even though, as we read in the earlier paragraph just before, even though many coaches said you'll have to choose, you won't be able to do both positions as a professional, even though that happened, or nonetheless, he heard all of that advice, but he remains steadfast in his commitment to being a two-way player. If you're steadfast, you're a little bit stubborn, but kind of in a good way. You're not going to change your mind. You're not going to quit. You're not going to give up. If you're in a relationship and one person moves to another city, both people will have to remain steadfast in their love for each other and to keep their relationship going, right? You kind of have to stick through the hard times, not listen to the people who say, that's not going to be easy. Maybe you should think about quitting. You're not going to listen to those. So you're being stubborn in kind of a positive way. So he was like, no, I'm going to be a two-way player. I know other people can do it, but they're not me, and I'm going to be able to do it, and I'll just practice harder than other people. And that's kind of what he did.
Right. So he was very devoted to staying a two-way player. And ever since he was young, he was very open about wanting to pursue his career in the MLB or Major League Baseball. So ever since he was young, he started his baseball career at a young age. He knew that one day he wanted to play baseball in America, in the States. I think it's very good if you have this type of dream to play in the big leagues that you stay steadfast because you want to be devoted to your skill and to work on your craft. Okay, so what a league is a group or a sports club which play each other over a period of time. So for example, MLB, we see lots of different baseball teams and they play each other throughout a whole baseball season. Or a league could also be like a soccer or football league in the UK. Lots of different types of soccer clubs. They'll play each other throughout the season. And at the end of the season, somebody will win the big trophy or the championship. And that's basically what a league is, a group of different teams or different groups playing the same type of sport.
There you go. And often they have that word in their title, right? MLB. We have the National Hockey League in North America, NHL. The EPL, as you mentioned, English Professional Soccer, English Premier League. And I think even the Spanish one is just called La Liga. So there you go, a bit of Spanish that sounds just like that word league. So yes, he decided, though, to stay in Japan and play for a team in the Japanese professional baseball leagues. However, he ultimately chose to sign with the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters. Good name. In 2013, as they were willing to accommodate his desire to both pitch and play as a position player, which the MLB teams weren't. Probably a good idea. He was probably still quite young at that time in 2013. This is more than 10 years ago. And it says, however, he ultimately chose. So I'm sure he had many offers from American teams, Japanese teams, teams from other parts of the world too, possibly. But in the end, that's how we're using ultimately here. In the end, when something happens ultimately, this is what happens in the end. This is the final thing. This is the final decision. Ultimately, I could have gone to Oxford or Harvard, but ultimately I decided to go to Shida or something like that. So in the end, when the final decision came down, he chose to sign with a Japanese team, the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters, in 2013. Why did he sign with the Ham Fighters? Well, of course, playing in your home country is probably more comfortable for a young player, but really it was because, as it says, they were willing to accommodate his desire to both pitch and play as a position player. To accommodate something is basically to allow something, to change a situation, to allow something to happen, or to make it possible for something to happen. If you're accommodating your guests, you're changing your home routine to allow them to come and stay with you and feel welcome. If you have special diet needs on an airplane or in a restaurant, they might try to accommodate you. Oh, well, this is a steak restaurant, but since you're a vegetarian, we'll create some wonderful vegetable dishes for you. We will accommodate your dietary requirements. So these teams would kind of adjust themselves and allow him to both pitch as a pitcher and play as a position player, and also play as a batter and other positions. The MLB teams at that time, they weren't. They were saying, as we learned earlier, you're either going to be a pitcher or a batter. We won't let you be both because that's too hard. But he proved them wrong. All right, we're going to have more about Shohei Ohtani tomorrow, but now it's time to go over to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分的最后一句用到单字 prospect 来指有希望的候选人，那它也可以表达发生的可能性啊，或者是前景。我们来学习它的字首字根。好， S-P-E-C-T 或者是拼作 S-P-E-C 这一类字根有看、看见或查看的意思。那么在 prospect 这个字当中，它的字首 P-R-O 表示向前，那字根 spect 表示看。当我们向前看，看向远方时，会看到景色，所以 prospect 可以指具体的景象景色，尤其是从高处所看到的景色。那它也有抽象的含义，可以指前景、展望等等的意思。我们顺便补充两个相同字根的单字，第一个是 inspect，它的字首 in 表示往内，那么 spect 表示看，合在一起呢，往里面仔细的看，应该就可以联想到 inspect， 它有检视、检验或审查的意思，通常就是指可能为了找出是否有错误或问题而仔细检查。第二个补充的是 suspect， 它的字首 sus 来自 sub， 表示在下方，那字根 spect 表示观看，在底下偷偷观看，那就表示不信任咯，所以 suspect 这个字当形容词表示可疑的、不可信的，当名词表示嫌疑犯，那当动词是念作 suspect， 可以表达怀疑或猜疑的意思。课文第三部分最后一句，它用到 accommodate 来表达满足、迎合，像是满足需求等等。我们也来补充它的字首字根。看到 MOD、MODE 这一类的字根有度量、衡量或者是方式的意思。那么在 accommodate 这个字当中，它的字首 AC 是来自 AD， 表示朝向。那么 COM 表示彻底或做强调用。字根 MOD 有衡量、度量的意思。 至于 ate 是动词字尾，同学们可以试着联想，当你对着目标对象彻底衡量出精确的因应方式，也许就可以联想到 accommodate， 它有适应、顺应或迎合的意思。那旅馆在规划住房来迎合顾客需求时，或者是场地在规划容纳人数时，也必须经过精密的衡量，那就可以联想到 accommodate， 它还有容纳、为什么提供空间、住宿的意思。好，那一样补充2个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 moderate， 它的字根 MODE 表示衡量， ATE 是形容词字尾。那当某事物的数量有经过衡量，不会太多也不会太少，那就表示它是适量的。用这样的方式应该可以联想到 moderate， 它可以形容适度的、适中的、节制的或温和的。第二个补充的是 modify， 它的字根 MOD 表示度量， IFY 是动词字尾，把某事物控制在度量的范围内，适度调整，不让它超出测量范围。用这样的方式也许可以联想到 modify， 它有调整、修改的意思。好，那以上今天重点整理，我们回顾这些单字吧。
Combination. At dinner, we enjoyed a delicious combination of ingredients and flavors. Favorable. Customers have generally given favorable reviews of the new hotel. Excel. Kenny has continued to excel in his studies, earning top grades semester after semester. Prospect. Andrea's experience and skills make her a leading prospect for the job. Nonetheless. Stuart faced many challenges. Nonetheless, he fought through them and achieved his goals. League. The basketball league I play in includes a total of 10 teams. Ultimately. After much consideration, they ultimately decided to move forward with the project. Accommodate. The company accommodated Cedric's desire to work remotely.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Kiki.
See you next time.